What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. Well, it's official. Microsoft has bought Bethesda and ZeniMax. They had put out a press release yesterday going over some of the details and essentially welcoming Bethesda and ZeniMax into the Xbox Game Studios family, if you will. And they did touch on exclusives a little bit, and we'll go over all of that here today. Also, we're going to talk about an update that was pushed to the Switch that seemed to cause quite a bit of confusion online. And I know many of you are probably getting tired of hearing about the Switch Pro and the new Nintendo Switch and the Switch revisions. So I figured today we'll talk about some information that might be pointing to the next generation Switch. Guys, if you enjoy these videos, make sure that like button helps out a ton. And if you're new here to the Small Wave channel, make sure you subscribe down below. And we're going to start today with an issue with the Xbox Series X that Microsoft appears to be rolling out a fix for. And I didn't notice a lot of people really mentioning this, a few, but not like a ton. It didn't seem to be a widespread issue, and we can head over here to Microsoft's notes around this update that's being pushed to insiders now, saying system various fixes to address consoles powering off unexpectedly while in use, fixes to address console performance while in standby. So I guess essentially people were playing the Xbox Series X, or even the Series S, and it would just shut off randomly as you're playing it. And I have not experienced this myself. I've seen, like I said, 2 or 3 people maybe on Twitter and forums mentioning this, but not a lot of other people did see this happen. So I guess Microsoft received enough reports about it, or just different crash reports or something mentioning this, and they decided to go ahead and just get that sorted out now. So good to see this is an update going out to insiders. I guess they'll be testing the build to make sure it's stable, and then I would expect an official rollout pretty soon after that. Also, do you remember all of those pictures we had that were being put up online and we scrutinized and zoomed in like 300 times to see any extra features about the PlayStation 5 dev kit? The thing looked like a hanger, a space hanger, right? A little V that was supposed to be like the 5, and we were like, maybe that's what the PS5 will look like, and it didn't at all. Well, we have our clearest look at this dev kit now, as it looks like some filings were being made online, and I guess they're not confidential now as they've been spotted, and we can see this here. We'll just go through several of the different images of the V dev kit that we've seen so many grainy and blurry pictures of, people running past a room, it looked like at times, to get a snapshot of this. And it looks certainly much more muted here in this setting where we're just getting measurements of it, and they even took a picture of the HDMI and power cable that come with it. They just want to show which cables are going to be used with it, I guess, there. But it makes a lot more sense now looking at this, why they had to go with this design versus the PlayStation 5 itself. You're not stacking PS5 systems up at all. I guess you could stand them up, but even then, it's a big system. This is much more compact, and you can then stack several dev kits on top. And you know what? I kind of like the PS5, I guess, overall design that we got compared to this, because this isn't even glowing blue and all this, like those really cool mock-up pictures. This kind of looks boring like this, to be honest, but either way, it makes sense, and that is our best look at it. I'll leave a link down below if you want to kind of go through the pictures for yourself. Oh, and we had just talked about Stadia working on the Xbox Series X through the Edge browser. Well, it looks like at least one other streaming service outside of xCloud will be working on. That's Geforce Now. We can go over to Video Games Chronicles here, where they say some Xbox users are now able to stream PC games to their consoles via a test version of Microsoft's Edge Chromium-powered browser and Geforce Now. So I'm not as up to date on the games that were or were not taken away from Geforce Now, but I know Death Stranding is on there, so that means that Death Stranding, I guess, is technically on the Xbox just through streaming with Geforce Now. Wow, the Xbox is quickly becoming very versatile overall for all the games you can play. I know you can play a lot of your Steam games on there and the Epic Game Store games, and then you have Stadia, and eventually we'll have xCloud, I guess, on there. Now, I am really curious that we're hearing about Geforce Now next to that. If Microsoft will work to block off Geforce Now and Stadia and just leave xCloud, I kind of think anyway that they might realize that, wow, a lot of people are using Geforce Now because they're just tapping into their Steam games. We'll see what happens with that one. But either way, yes, apparently Stadia, Geforce Now, and eventually xCloud will just be working on the Xbox. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with this Nintendo Switch update that was detected online and caused a lot of confusion at first. Eventually, we got it all sorted out as to what exactly it was. And it is apparently a new delivery method that I guess Nintendo is trying out for the first time here. We can see this bot on Twitter actually detected it. And you can follow this bot here for, just in case, I guess you want to keep up to date on any of like the Switch updates that get pushed. This will usually send out a tweet when that happens, and then everyone can rush to it and try to figure out what's going on exactly, because whenever there is an update of some kind that gets pushed to the Switch, people, get their list out of things that they want, like folders, which that's probably number one for a lot of people, is the ability to sort out your home screen. And I get it. I've seen the eShop. There are a ridiculous amount of games that come out every single day. Yeah, some way to organize and change up the home screen to accommodate that is kind of needed at this point, but also like themes, that would be cool as well. People have a lot of requests for just the overall system itself through updates, but it looks like this wasn't that. In fact, it did very little to the Switch overall. We can see Michael Sayers here just quickly goes over what this was. Updated the 11.0.1 wiki page to reflect yesterday's rebootless system update. Interesting that they're actually using the rebootless update feature. It's the first time they've ever done so. The update is boring, obviously. It just updates the bad word list. Nothing needed for Atmosphere, which should continue to work with no changes. Now, I did see a lot of people ask right away, what's the bad word list? Well, apparently Nintendo has like a literal, I guess, like text file or something on the Switch that stops you from inputting certain words. And I think it's pretty much public online. Like, you can look at the bad word list and see what Nintendo doesn't want you to put into the Switch. And this is a rebootless update that I guess just added more words or subtracted some. I'm not really sure, but either way, they updated that list without needing to actually reboot or restart your Switch, and that's something we're used to. You get a firmware update, okay, I have to go ahead and restart the Switch. The Switch doesn't take long to restart anyway, so it's not a big deal. It's more interesting that Nintendo can push updates and change things on your Switch without you really, you really wouldn't know because it doesn't have to restart, so it can kind of go in and it makes it a bit more seamless. I don't think they'd be able to do this for much larger updates, but it's nice to know that we don't necessarily have to go in and do this whole system reboot update and all this for something as small as that, especially like stability updates where nothing really happens at all. And they can also push things to it, I guess, without people realizing it necessarily, although this bot even picked this one up that wasn't much. So Nintendo's really not going to be able to get much past a lot of the people in the modding community. Either way, though, it's something new I guess they were trying out, and we'll see if they continue to use it. Next up, let's talk about Microsoft, Bethesda, and ZeniMax, as that deal has now closed. We've been covering this for the past couple of days as more and more confirmations were coming out through filings in Europe and the United States. It was just a matter of time before Microsoft was going to make it formal online with a big press release, and we can head over here to Xbox.com, where they say this is the next step in building an industry-leading first-party studios team, a commitment we have to our Xbox community. With the addition of the Bethesda creative teams, gamers should know that Xbox consoles, PC, and Game Pass will be the best place to experience new Bethesda games, including some new titles in the future that will be exclusive to Xbox and PC players. As we shared previously, it's vitally important that Bethesda continues making games the way it always has. We look forward to empowering Bethesda's creative teams to reach even more players around the world, helping make future Bethesda titles the biggest and most popular games in their history. Xbox and Bethesda have long shared a common vision for the future of gaming. Both as fans and as creators, Bethesda understands the potential of Game Pass. So just in those two paragraphs, I think they basically told us what their plans are going forward. Some new games from Bethesda will be exclusive to Xbox and PC. Bethesda, like Microsoft, realizes the future and the value of Game Pass. So what does that mean? Well, it sounds like some of these games coming up that, yes, very well could be as soon as Starfield, which I still think is going to be one of their big reveals during the E3 time, whether they're at E3 or they have presentations that are like around that time of E3 in June or July. That's going to be something that probably will be Xbox, PC, Game Pass, essentially exclusive. I think the games that they will keep on PlayStation 5 are kind of the games that are already there, especially live service games like Fallout 76. That game needs all the help it can get, all the players it can get. There's no point in taking that away. Or like the Elder Scrolls Online. I see those as how Microsoft treated something like Minecraft, where they just kind of left it alone and continue to support it and even update it with they did VR mode for PlayStation. So they have worked to improve that game despite it not necessarily being a game that's only on the Xbox and PC through Windows and Game Pass and all of that. Now, I am am curious if Microsoft will decide, maybe we could have all of those PlayStation users sign into Xbox Live to use this, and that would immediately bump up their monthly active users, which is indeed how they are trying to model their business around, are people signing into their services, because Microsoft at its core is a service-based business. Also, I saw a lot of people unhappy with the idea that Microsoft would take Bethesda games and just make them exclusive to the Xbox or Game Pass ecosystem, but that's what the entire industry runs on, are exclusives. Reasons for you to either buy into a service like Game Pass or buy a system like the Switch or the PlayStation, any of that. They create games with their first-party studios that entice you to spend then $300, $400, or $500 on these different systems, and then subsequently the accessories and the online fee to play these different multiplayer games and the SD cards and the controllers, and they gotta get you in somehow, and the way to do that is to make good games. So Microsoft made a move because ZeniMax wanted to be purchased. So what would you rather have? Microsoft buy them, or, I don't know, Google or Amazon do it? Also, I like the idea of this because that means that a lot of these games are just gonna go into Game Pass anyway, and you don't necessarily have to buy them, you just subscribe to Game Pass. That's what Microsoft wants you to do, and it kind of works out for a lot of people who aren't able to buy every single $60 or $70 game. It's just kind of thrown in there and you get to try it out. And speaking of which, it does sound like we should be expecting some sort of video presentation announcement tomorrow, as we had said before, because it appears some of these games are already kind of getting out there. One in particular, Wario64 posted this up, the Evil Within PC listed on Microsoft Store for this Friday, when it will likely be on Game Pass with other Bethesda games. I would expect them to immediately start to load up Game Pass with as many Bethesda games as are ready to go right now, and just continue to build on that subscription service as they roll towards what I'm going to assume is a Starfield E3 reveal. Next up, let's talk about the next generation Nintendo Switch. I know, a lot of you are getting annoyed and frustrated seeing 18 million Switch Pro videos, so I'm taking it to the next level. We're going to talk about the Switch in, well, it could be 3 to 4 years. It's hard to say because Nintendo sees the Switch as being midway through its current life cycle, or who knows, maybe they just get rid of the generations idea and they kind of adopt more like a cell phone idea and they just continue to release different Switch systems going forward. Either way though, this doesn't seem like technology that they're going to be using anytime soon, mostly because it's not even really available yet. Let's head over here to DocTray81, who did spot a couple of different listings on LinkedIn, both of which from NVIDIA, detailing what appears to be kind of the future of their ARM and Tegra lineup here. And we can see pioneer the next generation of graphics developer tools for game consoles, which, I mean, how many game consoles does NVIDIA make? Well, they, of course, worked with Nintendo to create the Switch, so by default, we assume they're talking about the Switch right there. Create graphics profiler features for NVIDIA GPUs, enabling developers to achieve higher and more consistent frame rates. And then the other listing that was spotted is a senior verification engineer, where it says gaming consoles and other automated machines, and it's linked to the Orin SoC. Now, Orin right now is part of NVIDIA's Drive lineup, which are their ARM processors that are used in autonomous vehicles, so like self-driving cars and all of this, and they have really leaned into that. In fact, I think the Tegra line may have gone away if it didn't fit so well with this whole self-driving car electric vehicle thing that's taken off now. But believe it or not, Orin was actually in the news this past 24 hours. We can head over here, this for Electronic Design, as they were detailing a deal that was put in place for Plug, who's going to be using Orin in these self-driving trucks that they have rolling out in 2022. There are a dozen 64-bit Hercules cores in the CPU complex, which is coupled with a GPU that includes CUDA tensor cores capable of delivering 208 TOPS. The CPU cores are based on ARM's dynamic IQ technology. Also in the mix are a programmable vision accelerator and NVIDIA's deep learning accelerator. The memory subsystem has a 200 gigabytes per second bandwidth, and there are 4 10 gigabit per second Ethernet ports. Wow, that is certainly next gen. We are talking 4 Ethernet ports. We have 1 right now. The video hardware can decode 8K video streams at 30 frames per second and encode 4K streams at 60 frames per second. This includes support for H.264, 265, VP9. The chip is built by TSMC using a 7 nanometer process technology. Now, what this boils down to is that Orin is a beast, yes. And it does appear to scale from like 5 watts up to 45 watts, although we still need some actual testing, and we need the chip to actually roll out of the factories for testing to happen, even outside of like a self-driving car. We need this in a consumer product, but this is something that would most likely be planned and used several years from now for something like the next Switch. But this is something that would set up the next Switch as more of a powerhouse compared to what we have now. I mean, obviously, Orin is well ahead of the current X1 that we're using, the Mariko chip and all of this. It's using Ampere technology. It has tensor cores already in it, and that would, of course, enable things like DLSS 2.0, or who knows, by then we might be talking about DLSS 3.0 or maybe even 4.0. Either way, though, this certainly looks like NVIDIA kind of getting geared up for the future of what the Switch will become with Nintendo, and it doesn't look like Nintendo's partnership with NVIDIA is going to be ending anytime soon, and it's exciting stuff. These are just like LinkedIn job listings that have appeared, but Dr. 81 did a good job spotting them, and I am very interested in the growth of the overall Tegra itself, and to hear about something like Orin eventually making its way into a game console, I want to see what that chip can do. And in our last bit of news, let's talk about Last of Us Part 2, because when it came out, people noticed something. There's no multiplayer, it's just single player. See, Last of Us Remastered had factions, and it had a very dedicated fan base for that game mode, but the fact that Last of Us Part 2 shows up and there's no factions, wait a minute, does that mean that they're not gonna do one at all? Well, it looks like Naughty Dog is gearing up to have some sort of multiplayer, and that's where things get kind of interesting. We head over here. This is a job listing that they have posted up for an economy designer for multiplayer. We're looking for a passionate multiplayer economy designer who can help us create avenues for self-expression for our players, ensure robust longevity to our games, and give our players great rewards to strive for. This is something you would design for a mostly free-to-play style game. A game that has microtransactions in it that would get you to spend money but not feel like you're being taken advantage of. There's that thin line, of course, that they try to walk. But either way, what this looks like to me is them gearing up for something like a Factions 2 or whatever they want to call it. It might not be called Factions 2, maybe they have another name in store for it, but what this could be here is it could be a free-to-play version of that. See, the fact that Factions was tied to a purchase price, I'm sure was fine for the most part, but it could have been so much larger if it was broken off and as a free-to-play app that you download like Fortnite. And that's the biggest craze now, is the fact that these free-to-play style games that can be continued going forward over like a decade worth of time, these live services, is something that Sony should be looking more into, especially on just the overall multiplayer side of things. They haven't done the best, especially recently. They've done very, very good with their single player experiences, but the multiplayer side they have certainly been lacking with, and something like a sequel to Factions as something that's separated from Last of Us Part 2, I think would do really, really well for them, and it does sound like Naughty Dog is working on something like that. So really the question now is, when would they be ready to reveal it? Well, maybe later on this year. I would like to think that they had been thinking about this when they were developing Last of Us Part 2, and they just had to get a few things ironed out and figure out the overall business strategy, but we'll see what happens hopefully later on this year. Before we head over to the comment of the day, we're gonna take a look at the poll that I posted up yesterday, where I asked, has a lower resolution a Switch game made you put the game down? 31% of you said yes, whereas 69% of you said no, I don't really notice it as much. And resolution is something that some people honestly won't notice as much as others, but one thing's for certain, if that frame rate is bad or it's stuttery or it's slow motion almost like WWE 2K18, that I think is something that would ruin the experience more than if it looked more like a Vaseline effect on your Switch when in portal mode, or if it's in docked mode and it's blown up on a screen. At least then it's not something that's going to ruin the experience with overall input. But I like the idea of Nintendo sticking with the hybrid model, don't overthink it, and just continue to kind of shrink down that sacrifice that's made for the hybrid concept. I mean, they're talking 4K now, and if they can really achieve that in docked mode and 720p in handheld mode, I do think the experience would get that much better. And we'll finish up with a comment of the day, as you're seeing here. This is from Klaus saying, wouldn't there be older contracts in place between Sony and Bethesda for Starfield? I mean, the only way that would happen is if Sony had signed a deal with Bethesda around Starfield like they did with Deathloop and Ghostwire Tokyo as being console exclusives for the PlayStation 5, at least for now. Those could be timed or any of that. It appeared, according to a report, that Sony had approached Bethesda about a deal like that with Starfield, but the talks broke down because Microsoft then came into talks with ZeniMax about just outright acquiring all of them. Microsoft basically one-upped them and said, you know, we'll just take the entire publisher and all of these studios rather than just do a timed exclusive deal here. But either way, that's just kind of where we are now. Exclusives are going to continue running this industry. And I mean, we're talking about, for example, Microsoft buying ZeniMax, Bethesda, and all that. People aren't happy that those games could end up exclusive. But I mean, on the flip side, think about it this way. Sony bought Insomniac. Does that mean that they're going to then put Sunset Overdrive 2, if they decide to do it, on the Xbox? Probably not. And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button, it really helps out. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about here today. There's the Microsoft, Bethesda, ZeniMax deal. How do you feel about those Bethesda games seemingly becoming Xbox, PC, and Game Pass exclusives? Also, what do you think about the next generation Switch possibly using this advanced Orin Tegra chipset? It's interesting stuff to consider, but we're still quite a ways off, maybe 3 or 4 years. Thanks, guys, for watching, and I'll see you next time.